This video is brought to you by Masterworks. So every now and then, a word seems to completely take over the discourse. Stuff like hipster, on fleek, chuggy, but none have had the staying power of this one.
Woke.
Formerly exclusive to black communities, the use of woke has really been on the rise since around 2016. And it's now impossible to watch the news,
the woke undertaking of corporate America,
listen to politicians,
we will fight the woke in government agencies,
or chat with an uncle without hearing it lobbed as an insult. So why is woke such a political lightning rod? What does it actually mean, and how did it become a catch-all term for a certain brand of liberal smugness? Let's find out in this Wisecrack edition, who broke wokeness? But before we get into it, I wanted to ask if you've noticed that in addition to collectively setting back our country, anti-woke crusaders are even hurting their own neighbors? Because while we don't care that much about temporary dips in the stock of Anheuser-Busch, it's really killer for people who own smaller stores and mid-level distributors, businesses which are often family-owned. That's more financial problems for regular people during a historically bad year. Even Bud Light going on sale can't help that our collective savings taking losses in the trillions. So it may feel like every area of the economy is nosediving, but I learned that that's actually not the case. In fact, some markets are seen as stores of wealth during times like these, like the art market, which is past even pre-pandemic levels. Bank of America believes that high net worth investors will continue to buy art despite larger economic concerns. And Morgan Stanley says the value of investment-grade art is less affected by market conditions. That's why today's sponsor, Masterworks, has put this market to work for us. No price tag or art degree necessary. In fact, in each of their 13 exits to date, Masterworks delivered a positive net return to their user. And the process is pretty simple. They securitize paintings with the SEC, allowing people like you and I to invest in shares of a painting. That documentation is all on Masterworks' page on the SEC's database, which is linked below. Now, once they sell a painting again, you get your share of the potential profit. And so far, Masterworks has handed back the net proceeds from over $45 million in sales from legends like Monet and Banksy. Over 700,000 people have joined the platform to date, but our subscribers can get priority access with the link in the description. So why not become an art person and check that out today? But for now, let's get back to the show. Like many slang terms to sweep the states, woke came out of African American Vernacular English, or AAVE, meaning being awake or alert to oppression against black folks. In the 20s, Marcus Garvey wrote, "Wake up Ethiopia, wake up Africa," calling for the creation of a united African nation. In 1938, singer-songwriter Huddie Ledbetter cautioned listeners to stay woke in a protest song about the dangers black people faced in the South. And in 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. gave a speech called Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution, about the importance of embracing new ideas and perspectives during times of radical change. In all these iterations, wokeness articulates a particular need for a vigilant black racial consciousness, both as a means of survival and of emancipation. In 1962, writer William Melvin Kelly's article in the New York Times, "If You're Woke, You Dig It," used the term as an example of black slang that was being appropriated by the usually white beatniks of the era. He noted that black slang is often fluid, and some terms like jive had evolved over time to mean their exact opposite. But the most recent era of woke began with Erykah Badu's song Master Teacher in 2008. Stay woke became an increasingly common refrain on Black Twitter and bubbled to the forefront of the lexicon with the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement in 2013. According to scholar Carl Rhodes, wokeness described a politically switched on, community-led, and solidarity-based political practice, defined by having awareness about and taking action against the oppression of black people, especially by the police. But of course, like any buzzword that gains popularity online, it took like 5 minutes for woke's meaning to collapse in on itself. By 2015, the clickbait-happy BuzzFeed published an article about Orange is the New Black actor Matt McGorry that called him so bae and so woke. Reading those words out loud made me feel so bad. Around 2016, according to linguist Tony Thorne, it also developed its ironic meaning to make fun of latte-slurping Prius progressives who wielded their wokeness to scold and judge others. Now, in these cases, woke was more about liberals having the right opinions on various cultural and social matters than it was about raising critical awareness of systemic issues. Right-wing politicians and pundits seized on the term as a way to belittle their opponents.
You know what woke means? It means you're a loser.
There's something inevitable about this whole cycle. Writer Elijah Wilson sums it up, saying, like anything created by black people, the phrase was appropriated by the masses, transformed into a trend term before ultimately mutating into a meme and becoming a form of irony. Even Badu recently said that the word doesn't belong to us anymore. Indeed, what regained prominence in Badu's song, and again in 2016 via Childish Gambino, has become the go-to response on the right whenever they're asked to pinpoint the root of all of society's problems.
He's against the woke, against wokeness. And now he's pushing the idea of some kind of, quote, woke mind virus.
So how did woke go from describing black consciousness to describing the oppression of traditional middle-class white culture, which I guess is mayonnaise? I don't know what traditional middle-class white culture is. Mayonnaise, church, watching CBS crime dramas, loveless marriages, things of that nature. To understand that, we need to look to corporate America, which, as it does with any countercultural movement, quickly incorporated wokeness into what Rhodes calls woke capitalism in his book of the same name. This, as Rhodes tells it, started in the 1950s, when the business world became fixated on corporate responsibility, i.e. they attempted to answer the question, what do corporations owe society on a moral level? Now, before you think these were bleeding hearts and suits, it's important to note the corporate responsibility movement was, from its earliest days, explicitly about self-interest. Its earliest advocates argued that if businesses behaved morally, the government would be less likely to intervene in or regulate their practices. Rhodes writes, businesses taking on social responsibility was primarily a defensive tactic to ward off what was seen as a real threat of socialism. Now, fast forward to the shitty 1970s economy, and then the rise of neoliberalism in the 80s, and the guiding ethos of corporate America became the shareholder value movement. This was the idea that the primary purpose of any business was to maximize profit for its shareholders. It was accompanied by things like corporate raiding of smaller companies and soaring pay packages for execs who were good little profit maximizing boys and only sometimes were complete psychos. Interestingly, throughout the 80s and 90s, the idea of corporate social responsibility, CSR, took off, but only insofar as acts of social responsibility helped the shareholders' bottom line, often by generating positive publicity. Starbucks offered free tuition programs for employees. Companies like IKEA and Nike pledged to crack down on child labor in their supply chain, and Chevron employees saved endangered butterflies. They saved endangered butterflies, and then they made a bunch of gas. I hope that after they did that, they all got butterfly tattoos on their lower backs. And for anyone who's really young, there was this period in the early 2000s where a lot of people all at once got butterfly tattoos on their lower backs. It was a real movement, and someone should write a book on why that happened.
Come my lady, come my lady, you're my butterfly, sugar, baby.
Now, as the millennium ended, Rhodes argues that CSR persisted as a salve for collective skepticism towards corporate America after the Enron fallout and the dot-com bust. Amidst rising inequality, corporations with an apparent do-gooder spirit were viewed favorably. Rhodes writes, what were once social problems became recast as strategic opportunities for business. The connection of social responsibility with corporate power and shareholder value formed the basis of what would become woke capitalism. And guys, it's confession time. Your buddy Michael got caught up in this in 2003 when I paid extra for a Motorola Razr flip phone that was from U2's Red campaign because it was going to help end AIDS in Africa. If you're from Motorola, let me know in the comments how that turned out. Now, woke capitalism is interesting because it came to fruition in an era directly following about 40 years of shareholder value maximizing and rapidly increasing income inequality. Today, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and Jeff Bezos have as much personal wealth as the bottom 50% of Americans. Philosopher Frederick Gross classifies the present as an age of indecency, i.e. inequality so disgusting he needed a new term for it. According to Rhodes, today corporations seek a moral justification for their existence, positioning themselves as the saviors of the exploitative inequality generating system that they produced. Woke capitalism is that moral justification, an attempt to bathe business in an ethical glow, so that the excesses of inequality it has produced don't create an angry mob hell-bent on destroying it. Now, this is sometimes called woke washing. Kind of like the way that greenwashing is used to describe posturing as environmentally aware. Think about stuff like the infamous Kendall Jenner Pepsi commercial, which somehow argues that Antifa and the police would all get along if they just hung out and drank a cold Pepsi. Also, if you're someone who, if you have the option to drink a Coke or Pepsi product, choose Pepsi. In the comments, let us know why. I've never seen a person drink Pepsi. I don't know who's drinking Pepsi. I want to know if you're drinking Pepsi. But according to Rhodes, there's a pretty big problem with this. Specifically, woke washing represents corporate America's staggering intrusion from the economic realm into the political, and from the private into the public. This, he argues, undermines democracy, given that democracy is predicated on the equal political power of each citizen. At the same time, the very wealthiest Americans have become more sophisticated than ever at evading taxes, i.e. avoiding their responsibility to pay their fair share for services like roads, healthcare, clean water, and so on. The top 1% of Americans dodges an estimated $163 billion a year in taxes, according to the U.S. Department of the Treasury. It's easy to imagine that if they actually contributed reasonable taxes, it would facilitate conditions for things like government-subsidized education, healthcare, and so on. Instead, billionaires like Jeff Bezos, who recently donated $10 billion to fight climate change, are increasingly dedicating themselves to fulfilling certain roles that normally belong to the state. Atlantic writer Franklin Foer calls this a new private state, where public goods are dispensed at the whim of a virtue-signaling private elite. This all recalls Andrew Carnegie's Gospel of Wealth, which argued that inequality was inevitable, even morally right, but that it was the job of the wealthy to decide how to spend their money to help the poor. Now, under the system, and with an increasingly strapped social safety net, the supremely wealthy have the power to decide what kinds of services or even political rights the disenfranchised deserve. Now, in this way, woke capitalism starts to look a whole lot like table crumbs thrown down from the towering giants of industry. Rhodes writes, woke capitalism buttresses a self-satisfied ruling elite who believe that their wealth is deserved. At the same time, it's worth thinking about what kinds of causes woke corporations are most often aligning themselves with. Stuff like LGBTQ rights, girl bossy feminism, diversity in the workplace, and so on. Helen Lewis of The Atlantic notes that companies reliably align with socially radical rather than economically radical causes, essentially allowing them to garner progressive street cred without threatening the economic order the way, say, pushing for UBI or stronger unions would. She calls this the iron law of woke capitalism, writing that brands will gravitate toward low-cost, high-noise signals as a substitute for genuine reform. Rather than challenging the system, this merely reinforces it and the elite's power to lord over it. So, like, we can celebrate Pride Month at work, but we're still gonna work, 60 hours a week while barely paying rent. And then paying so much for healthcare on top of the fact that we have a health plan. It's like, what's the point of having health insurance if I go to the doctor because my thumb hurts? And they're like, oh, I'll do a little x-ray. And then I get a bill that's like, you owe us $300. Real thing that happened. My thumb hurt. Go to the doctor. I'm there for 25 minutes. Bill comes a month later. $300, please. It's like, what the f? Someone explain it to me. Someone explain it to me. Slavoj Žižek argues that woke signaling becomes a way to avoid actually having to reckon with the supreme power the wealthy elite have unfairly collected. He writes, and we note he writes this in an essay that does have a lot of problems, they submit to woke demands because most of them really are guilty of participating in social domination. But submitting to woke demands offers them an easy way out. You gladly assume your guilt insofar as this enables you to go on living the way you did. This also leads to social concepts like allyship. And while it's of course not a bad thing to consider yourself an ally of oppressed or marginalized groups, there's a risk that once I tweet about being an ally or post a black square on my Instagram, it alleviates any social or material responsibility I feel to really do anything to make meaningful change, which is unfortunate, as the original usage of the term woke, largely in the work of black activists, artists, and writers, dealt precisely with being aware of systemic and material oppression for the sake of transforming those systems. And in this way, it shares the spirit of folks like Marx, who thought that the point of philosophy wasn't simply to understand the world, but to transform the world. And Plato, whose allegory of the cave argues that seeing past ideologies and illusions to get at what's really going on is an essential act of seeking wisdom. But for the woke capitalist, this has turned into aligning your brand with cultural and social signifiers that make you good. And it's not just billionaires and CEOs allaying their guilt with performative wokeness. Woke capitalism offers us all a way to purchase virtue. Buying some rainbow Legos is a lot easier than doing the hard work of learning or organizing. New York Times columnist and broken clock Ross Douthat even argues that brand identification with a woke company fills a certain hole, giving us a sense that we share certain collective values, a feeling that used to be provided by robust community life. And woke capitalism has been critical to twisting the word's original meaning, because conservatives are right in some ways. Yeah, I said it. Feel free to rewind that and play it back if you thought you heard me wrong. Corporations are behaving quite cynically with their activism. The fact that people started profiting off of wokeness has transformed a radical political ethos into what many see as merely an excuse for grandstanding. It's not surprising that it pisses so many people off. Woke capitalism is about generating profit and being congratulated for doing so. As Rhodes writes, feel-good corporate self-righteousness did nothing to make any real changes to the heart of capitalism's agenda. If anything, it strengthened it. Corralling wealth in the direction of the owners of capital remained the name of the game. We'd argue that woke capitalism is in fact quite pernicious, just not in the way Fox News thinks. Because corporate America's adoption of performative wokeness has, as it so often does, seeped into the culture at large. This version of wokeness has almost nothing to do with the term's original meaning, which focused on raised consciousness and collective action, and a lot more to do with companies trying to seem good, so we'll buy shit. And on the downstream, people trying to seem good to achieve social capital. You know, like becoming good allies without leaving their condos. Liberal political activism increasingly places its focus on cultural products. You know, rainbow Legos, t-shirts that show that you have good politics, stickers on your car that make you seem like you're on the right side of history, and identities, like how many Fortune 500 female CEOs there are. In doing so, it's ignoring material, economic, and historical conditions that lead to systemic inequalities and oppression across race, class, gender, and sexual identities. Making your social media avatar a black box might signify wokeness in a way that gives you a progressive street cred. But unless that's translated into material action, all it really means is that you understand how to appear woke in its most reductive sense. It's the political equivalent of buying a tie-dye shirt at Target and then calling yourself a deadhead. Come on, guys, come to a show first, and then you can call yourself that. Or as professors Teyama Lopez Binyasi and Candace Watts-Smith write, striving to be educated around issues of social justice is laudable and moral, but striving to be recognized by others as a woke individual is self-serving and misguided. So to those of you who are making a competition out of racial consciousness and progressive politicking, please get over yourself. But hey, what do you guys think? Are the angry boys and girls of Fox News right to see wokeness as the downfall of Western civilization? Is this just another example of a term from black culture being appropriated and turned into a marketable product? Or, in our increasingly cynical age, is voting with our dollars about as much as we can do? Let us know what you think in the comments. Want to give a special shout out to all of our patrons who know that by supporting us with their dollars, they're not better people, but they have the chance to be, and it means a lot to us. So if you want to consider supporting us and in return getting some extra content, getting videos early without ads, getting on our Discord server, click the link in the description, check it out. If you got some money to spare, it'd mean a lot to us. But for all of you who are hanging out and watching videos, it means a lot to us, and we know that you don't watch these videos to become better people or to virtue signal. You do it to think about the world in such a way that develops your own consciousness and subjectivity, and it means a lot to us that you do that. It also means a lot to us when you click things and type things and do stuff that feeds the algorithm. So thanks for that. In the meantime, I don't know, stay away from buzzwords, and we'll see you later.